Hello, hello, my creepies. Please excuse me. I was, just playing with my balls. Well, scary Christmas, happy horror days, whatever you celebrate. I have managed to somehow make this island a little bit more festive, decorating my palm tree. Just something about the holidays. It makes me so happy, spirits, making merry, being bright. I love the decorating, the gift exchange, and a little tradition that goes way back to the Victorians. Such morbidly wonderful, thoughtful people. They like to spend their Christmases telling ghost stories. And lucky enough, I have somehow managed to procure an anthology of Christmas ghost stories. There's bound to be something delightfully spooky in here. While I look, enjoy this cartoon.
Christmas gone but once a year, now it's here, bringing lots of joy and cheer, tra-la-la-la-la. There is a Santa Claus, Christmas gone but once a year, now it's here, bringing lots of joy and cheer, tra-la-la-la-la. Oh! What's the matter in here, I wonder? Looks like a pretty gloomy Christmas for those poor kids. What can I do? Let me think. Huh? 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 Ah! Oh, no. Hooray! I've got it!
Wolverden Tower by Grant Allen. Maisie Llewellyn had never been asked to Wolverden before, therefore she was not a little elated at Mrs. West's invitation. For Wolverden Hall, one of the loveliest Elizabethan manors in the Weald of Kent, had been bought and fitted up in appropriate style, the phrase is the upholsterer's, by Colonel West, the famous millionaire from South Australia. The colonel had lavished upon it untold wealth, fleeced from the backs of 10,000 sheep and an equal number of his fellow countrymen. And Wolverden was now, if not the most beautiful, at least the most opulent country house within easy reach of London. Mrs. West was waiting at the station to meet Maisie. The house was full of Christmas guests already, as it is true, but Mrs. West was a model of stately, old-fashioned courtesy. She would not have omitted meeting one among the number of any less excuse than a royal command to appear at Windsor. She kissed Maisie on both cheeks. She had always been fond of Maisie, and leaving two haughty young aristocrats, in powdered hair and blue and gold livery, to hunt up her luggage by the light of nature, sailed forth with her through the door to the carriage. The drive up the avenue to Wolverden Hall Maisie found quite delicious. Even in the leafless winter condition, the great limes looked so noble, and the ivy-covered hall at the end, with its mullioned windows, its Inigo Jones porch, and its creeper-clad gables, was as picturesque a building as the ideals one sees in Mr. Abbey's sketches. If only Arthur Hume had been one of the party now, Maisie's joy would have been complete. But what was the use thinking so much about Arthur Hume, when she didn't even know whether Arthur Hume cared for her? A tall and slim girl, Maisie Llewellyn, with rich black hair and ethereal features, as became a descendant of Llewellyn ap Iorwerth, the sort of girl we none of us would have called anything more than interesting till Rossetti and Burne-Jones found eyes for us to see that the type is beautiful, with a deep beauty, than that of your obvious pink and white prettiness. Her eyes, in particular, had a lustrous depth that was almost superhuman, and her fingers and nails were strangely transparent in their waxen softness. "You won't mind my having put you in a ground-floor room in the new wing, my dear, will you?" Mrs. West inquired, as she led Maisie personally to the quarters chosen for her. "You see, we're so unusually full because of these tableaux." Maisie gazed around the ground floor room in the new wing with eyes of mute wonder. If this was the kind of lodging for which Mrs. West thought it necessary to apologize, Maisie wondered of what sort were those better rooms which she gave to the guests she delighted to honor. It was a large and exquisitely decorated chamber, with the softest and deepest oriental rug Maisie's feet had ever felt, and the daintiest curtains her eyes had ever lighted upon. True, it opened by French doors onto what was nominally the ground in front, but as the Italian terrace with its formal balustrade and its great stone balls was raised several feet above the level of the sloping garden below, the room was really on the first floor for all practical purposes. Indeed, Maisie rather liked the unwonted sense of space and freedom which was given by this easy access to the world without, and as the windows were secured by great shutters and fasteners, she had no counterbalancing fear, lest a nightly burglar should attempt to carry off her little pearl necklet, or her amethyst brooch, instead of directing his whole attention to Mrs. West's famous diamond tiara. She moved naturally to the window. She was fond of nature. The view it disclosed over the Weald at her feet was wide and varied. Misty range lay behind misty range, in a faint December haze, receding and receding, till away to the south, half hidden by vapor, the Sussex Downs loomed vague in the distance. The village church, as happened so often in the case of old lordly manors, stood within the grounds of the hall, and close by the house. It had been built, her hostess said, in the days of the Edwards, but had portions of an older Saxon edifice still enclosed in the chancel. The one eyesore in the view was its new white tower, recently restored, or rather, rebuilt, which contrasted most painfully with the mellow gray stone and mouldering corbels of the nave and transept. "What a pity it's been so spoiled," Maisie exclaimed, looking across the tower. Coming straight as she did from a Maronite rectory, she took an ancestral interest in all that concerned churches. "Oh, my dear," Mrs. West cried, "please don't say that, I beg of you, to the Colonel. If you were to murmur 'spoiled' to him, you'd wreck his digestion. He spent ever so much money over securing the foundations and reproducing the sculpture on the old tower we took down, and it breaks his heart when anybody disapproves of it. For some people, you know, are so absurdly opposed to a reasonable restoration." "Oh, but this isn't even restoration, you know," Maisie said with the frankness of 20 and the specialist interest of an antiquary's daughter. "This is pure reconstruction." "Perhaps so," Mrs. West answered. "But if you think so, my dear, don't breathe it at Wolverden." A fire of ostentatiously wealthy dimensions and of the best glowing coal burned bright on the hearth, but the day was mild and hardly more than autumnal. Maisie found the room quite unpleasantly hot. She opened the windows and stepped out onto the terrace. Mrs. West followed her, then paced up and down the broad gravelled platform for a while. Maisie had not yet taken off her travelling cloak and hat, and then strolled half unconsciously toward the gate of the church. The churchyard, to hide the tombstones of which the parapet had been erected, was full of quaint old monuments, with broken-nosed cherubs, some of them dating from comparatively early period. The porch, with its sculptured niches deprived of their saints by Puritan hands, was still rich and beautiful in its carved detail. On the seat inside, an old woman was sitting. She did not rise as the lady of the manor approached, and went on mumbling and muttering inarticulately to herself in sulky undertone. Still, Maisie was aware, none the less, that the moment she came near, a strange light gleamed suddenly in the old woman's eyes, and that her glance was fixed upon her. A faint thrill of recognition seemed to pass like a flash through her palsied body. Maisie knew not why, but she was dimly afraid of the old woman's gaze upon her. "It's a lovely old church," Maisie said, looking up at the trefoil finials on the porch, all except the tower. "We had to reconstruct it," Mrs. West answered apologetically. Mrs. West's general attitude in life was apologetic, as though she felt she had no right to so much more money than her fellow creatures. "It would have fallen in if we hadn't done something to buttress it up. It was really in a most dangerous and critical condition." "Lies! Lies! Lies!" the old woman burst out suddenly, and though in a strange, low tone, as speaking to herself. "It would not have fallen. They knew it would not. It could not have fallen. It would never have fallen if they had not destroyed it. And even then I was there when they pulled it down. Each stone clung to each, with arms and legs and hands and claws, till they burst them asunder by main force with their new-fangled stuff. I don't know what they call it, dynamite or something. It was all of it done for one man's vainglory." "Come away, dear," Miss West whispered, but Maisie loitered. "Wolverden Tower was fasted thrice," the old woman continued in a sing-song quaver. "It was fasted thrice with swords of maids against every assault of man or devil. It was fasted at the foundations against earthquake and ruin. It was fastest at the top against thunder and lightning. It was fasted in the middle against storm and battle. And there it would have stood for 1,000 years if a wicked man had not raised a vainglorious hand against it. For that's what the rhyme says. Fasted thrice with souls of men stands the Tower of Wolverden. Fasted thrice with maiden's blood, 1,000 years of fire and flood shall see it stand as erst it stood." She paused a moment, then raising one skinny hand towards the brand new stone, she went on in the same voice, but with a malignant fervor. 1,000 years the tower shall stand, till ill assailed by evil hand. By evil hand and evil hour, fasted thrice with warlock's power, shall fall the stains of Wolverden Tower. She tottered off as she ended, and she took her seat on the edge of a depressed vault in the churchyard close by, still eyeing Maisie Llewellyn with a weird and curious glance, almost like the look which a famishing man casts upon the food in a shop window. "Who is she?" Maisie asked, shrinking away in undefined terror. "Oh, old Bessie," Mrs. West answered, looking more apologetic for the parish than ever. "She's always hanging about here. She has nothing else to do, and she's an outdoor pauper. You see, that's the worst of having the church in one's grounds, which is otherwise picturesque and romantic and baronial. The road to it is public. You must admit all the world. And old Bessie will come here. The servants are afraid of her. They say she's a witch. She has the evil eye, and she drives girls to suicide. But they cross her hand with silver all the same, and she tells them their fortunes, gives them each a butler. She's full of dreadful stories about Wolverden Church, stories to make your blood run cold, my dear, compact with old superstitions and murders and so forth. And they're true, too. That's the worst of them. She's quite a character. Mr. Blades, the antiquary, is really attached to her. He says she's now the sole living repository of the traditional folklore and history of the parish. But I don't care for it myself. It gars one's street, as we say in Scotland. Too much burying alive in it, don't you know, my dear, to quite suit my fancy." They turned back as she spoke toward the carved wooden light gate, one of the oldest and most exquisite of its class in England. When they reached the vault by whose door old Bessie was seated, Maisie turned once more to gaze at the pointed lancet windows of the early English choir, and the still more ancient dog-tooth ornament of the ruined Norman Lady Chapel. "How solidly it's built!" she exclaimed, looking up at the arches which alone survived the fury of the Puritan. "It really looks as if it would last forever." Old Bessie had bent her head, and it seemed to be whispering something at the door of the vault. But at the sound she raised her eyes, turning her wizened face toward the lady of the manor, mumbled through her few remaining fang-like teeth an old local saying: "Bradbury for length, Wolverden for strength, and Church Hatton for beauty." 3 brothers builded churches 3, and fasted thrice each church shall be. Fasted thrice with maidens' blood, to make them safe from fire and flood. Fasted thrice with souls of men, Hatton, Bradbury, Wolverden. "Come away," Maisie said, shuddering. "I'm afraid of that woman." Why was she whispering at the doors of the vault down there? "I don't like the look of her." "My dear," Mrs. West answered, in no less terrified a tone, "I will confess, I don't like the look of her myself. I wish she'd leave the place. I've tried to make her. The Colonel offered her £50 down in a nice cottage in Surrey if only she'd go. She frightens me so much, but she wouldn't hear of it. She said she must stop by the bodies of her dead. That's her style. Don't you see? A sort of modern ghoul, a degenerate vampire. And from the bodies of her dead in Wolverden Church, no living soul should ever move her." Ugh, that is all a mouthful. Let's take a break and start on our next feature. Speaking of ghost stories, we are about to watch one of the most well-known classic ghost stories for Christmas time. This is an adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol from 1935. I've seen this one labeled A Christmas Carol. I've also seen it
step in, please, sir?
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe.
Yes, sir. Is there anything I can do for you, sir?
Well, if it is quite convenient, I should like to speak with a member of the firm.
You wish to see me, I presume, sir?
Yes. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years.
Oh.
Dead as a doornail. Died 7 years ago, this very night.
Oh. We took the liberty of calling on you at your chambers, Mr. Scrooge, thinking that you would have finished business for the day, but we failed to make anyone here.
That's not surprising. I'm the only person who lives there.
Right. Consequently, we have called here.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it seems more than usually desirable to make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer terribly at this present time.
Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Yes, plenty of prisons.
The union workhouses are still in operation, eh?
They are still. I wish I could say they were not.
Forlorn, the treadmill are in full vigor then, eh?
Both very busy, sir.
Very glad to hear it, sir. I thought from what you said that something had occurred to interfere with them in their useful course. Very glad to hear it, sir. Very glad to hear it.
Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christmas cheer of mind and body for the multitude, some few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor of London meat and drink and means of warmth.
We choose this time because this is the time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices.
Now, what shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
Nothing? Oh, I see. You wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone, sir. Since you ask me what is my wish, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas. I can't afford to make a lot of idle people merry. I help to support the institutions we've just mentioned. They cost enough. People are badly off, they'd better go there.
Many can't go there. Many would rather die.
Well, if they'd rather die, they'd better do it. And decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, sir, I don't know that.
But you should know it.
It's not my business, sir. A man's got enough to do in this world to mind his own business. Without interfering with a lot of other people's, mine occupies me constantly. Good evening, sir.
Allow me to express my regrets, sir, if I have said anything.
Good evening. May I inquire, Mr. Cratchit, what you're doing with that shovel full of coal?
Why, I beg your pardon, sir, but the outer office is intensely cold, and my fire...
Your fire?
I should have said your fire, sir.
Yes, sir.
It shows symptoms of going out, and I thought I might venture to replenish it with a small quantity of coal.
Yeah. Well, of course, it's very evident to me, Mr. Cratchit, that you and I left apart. Oh, I see no help for it, sir. You don't pay for the coal, so you can afford to be reckless. Therefore, very evident to me, sir, that my interest is not your interest. Nor my welfare, your welfare. Get on with your work, sir. That'll keep you warm enough. I'm not cold. Why should you be? And I'm your senior by a great many years, I fancy.
And all about a small shovel full of coal.
And none of your mumbling, none of your mumbling. You have a wife and family to support, I understand.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. How many children you got?
Around half dozen, sir. 3 boys and 3 girls.
Tut, tut, tut. Can I afford a wife?
Yes, sir.
Eh?
I mean, no, sir.
Have I any children?
I don't know, sir.
Eh?
No, sir.
How much am I constrained to pay you a week for your services?
15 shillings, sir.
Ah. be to your interest, sir, to see that you're worth it.
Merry Christmas to you, Uncle, and God save you.
Ah, humbug.
Christmas a humbug? You can't mean that, I'm sure.
I do mean it, sir. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then. What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Ah, humbug.
Oh, don't be cross, Uncle.
How can I help being cross, sir, when I live in such a world of fools as this is? A Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you, sir? The time for paying bills without money. Time for finding yourself a year older? Not a penny of it, sir. If I had my way, sir, every fool who goes about saying Merry Christmas should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of olive through his heart. He should.
Uncle!
Nephew, you keep Christmas your way. Let me keep it in mine.
Keep it? But you don't keep
Well, let me leave it alone then. Much good has it done you? Much good will it ever do you?
It's the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut hearts freely. And therefore, though it's never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, God bless it.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Mr. Cratchit, if I hear another word from you, you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. Dear, 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 dear. Quite a powerful speaker, sir. No wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
I'll see you...
But why? Why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because I fell... Good evening.
But you never came to see us before that happened. Why give that as a reason for not coming now?
Good evening, sir.
But I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you.
Well, you won't get it, so you won't be disappointed, will you?
We've never had a quarrel to which I've been party. So why not let us part friends?
Good evening, sir.
Well, I'm sorry with all my heart to find this a relative. But I've made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good evening, sir.
And a Happy New Year.
You're a noisy devil, that's what you are, sir.
Merry Christmas, Bob Cratchit.
And the same to you, sir, and many of them. And not forgetting your good lady, Mrs. Fred.
Thank you, Cratchit. A Merry Christmas to you. A Merry Christmas.
Always ready and willing to quit your work, I notice.
It's 7 o'clock, sir.
That clock's fast. Well, I suppose you'll want all day off tomorrow, eh?
Well, sir, if it's quite convenient.
It isn't convenient. It isn't fair. If I were to stop half a crown for it, oh, you'd be mightily ill-used, I'll be bound, wouldn't you? Don't think I'm ill-used, do you? When I have to pay a whole day's wages. No work.
It only happens once a year, sir.
That's a pretty excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. Well, I suppose you've got to have it. Yeah, there's the key. You see, sir, that you're here all the earlier next morning.
Good night, sir. And a Merry Christmas.
Bah, humbug.
It's weighing down, and it weighs a bit, I can tell you, too. I can tell you. A Merry Christmas, sir.
Humbug.
Yes, that's a fine bird, Daddy, a fine bird. There's not another bird like that in the whole of the house. You will certainly be good if you won't find one like it.
Oh, let's take a break from old Scrooge there and continue on with Miss Maisie Llewellyn and her visit to Wolverden. For dinner, Maisie wore her white satin empire dress, high-waisted, low-necked, and cut in a bodice with a certain baby-like simplicity of style, which was exactly suited to her strange and uncanny type of beauty. She was very much admired. After dinner, the tableau. They had been designed and managed by a famous royal academician. Royal. And were mostly caught up by the members of the house party. The first tableau, Maisie learned from the gorgeous program, was Jephthah's daughter. The subject was represented at the pathetic moment when the doomed virgin goes forth from her father's house with her attendant maidens to bewail her virginity for 2 months upon the mountains, before the fulfillment of the awful vow which bound her father to offer her up for a burnt offering. Jeez. This really is a bit morbid, isn't it? Maisie thought it was too solemn and tragic a scene for a festive occasion, but the famous R.A. had a taste for such things, and his grouping was certainly most effectively dramatic. A perfect symphony in white and gray, said Mr. Wills, the art critic. How awfully affecting, said most of the young girls. Reminds me a little too much, my dear, of old Bessie's stories, Mrs. West whispered low, leaning from her seat across 2 rows to Maisie. A piano stood a little on one side of the platform, just in front of the curtain. The intervals between the 2 pieces were filled with songs which, however, had been evidently arranged in keeping with the solemn and half-mystical tone of the tableau. It is the habit of amateurs to take a long time in getting their scenes in order, so the interposition of the music was a happy thought as far as its prime intention went. But Maisie wondered. They could not have chosen some livelier song for Christmas Eve than "Oh, Mary, go and call the cattle home, and call the cattle home, and call the cattle home, across the sands of Dee." Her own name was Mary when she signed it officially, and the sad lilt of the last line, "But never home came she," rang unpleasantly in her ear through the rest of the evening. The second tableau was the sacrifice of Iphigenia. It was admirably rendered. The cold and dignified father, standing apparently unmoved by the pyre, the cruel faces of the attendant priests, the shrinking form of the immolated princess, the mere blank curiosity and inquiring interest of the helmeted heroes looking on, to whom this slaughter of a virgin victim was but an ordinary incident of the Achaean religion. All these had been arranged by the academical director with consummate skill and pictorial cleverness. But the group that attracted Maisie most among the components of the scene was that of the attendant maidens, more conspicuous here in their flowering white chitons than even they had been when posed as companions of the beautiful and ill-fated Hebrew victim. 2 in particular excited her close attention, 2 very graceful and spiritual-looking girls, in long white robes of no particular age or country, who stood at the very end near the right edge of the picture. "How lovely they are, those 2 last on the right," Maisie whispered to her neighbor, an Oxford undergraduate with a budding mustache. "I do so admire them." "Do you?" he answered, fondling the mustache with one dubious finger. "Well now, do you know? I don't think I do. They're rather coarse-looking, and besides, I don't quite like the way they've got their hair done up in bunches. Too fashionable, isn't it? Too much of the present day. I don't care to see a girl in a Greek costume with her coiffure so evidently turned out by Truefitts. Oh, I don't mean those two, Maisie answered, a little shocked he should think she had picked out such meretricious faces. I apologize. There are so many words in here that I don't know, and so I am probably butchering them. I'm not as fancy as the Victorians. Anyways, I mean, those two. Beyond them again. The two with their hair so simply and sweetly done, the ethereal-looking dark girls. The undergraduate opened his mouth and stared at her in a blank amazement for a moment. Well, I don't see, he began and broke off suddenly. Something in Maisie's eyes seemed to give him pause. He fondled his mustache, hesitated, and was silent. At the end of the tableau, one or two of the characters were not needed in succeeding pieces, came down from the stage and joined the body of spectators as they often do, in their character dresses, a good opportunity in point of fact for retaining through the evening the advantages conferred by theatrical costume, rouge, and pearl powder. Among them, the two girls Maisie had admired so much glided quietly towards her and took the two vacant seats on either side, one of which had just been quitted by the awkward undergraduate. They were not only beautiful in face and figure, on a closer view, but Maisie found them the first extremely sympathetic. They burst into talk with her, frankly and at once, with charming ease and grace of manner. They were ladies in the grain, in instinct and breeding. The taller of the two, whom the other addressed as Yolande, seemed particularly pleasing. Oh, the very name charmed Maisie. She was friends with them at once. They both possessed a certain nameless attraction that constitutes in itself the best possible introduction. Maisie hesitated to ask them whence they came, but it was clear from their talk they knew Wolverden intimately. After a minute, the piano struck up once more. As chance would have it, the vocalist began singing the song Maisie hated most of all. It was Scott's ballad of Proud Maisie, set to music by Carlo Ludovici. That's not ominous or creepy at all. Maisie listened to the song with grave discomfort. She had never liked it, and tonight it appalled her. She did not know that just at that moment Mrs. West was whispering in a perfect fever of apology to a lady by her side. Oh dear, what a dreadful thing of me ever to have permitted that song to be sung here tonight. It was horribly thoughtless. By now I must remember Miss Llewellyn's name you know is Maisie, and there she is listening to it with a face like a sheet. I shall never forgive myself. The tall, dark girl by Maisie's side, with whom the other called Yolande, leaned across to her sympathetically. You don't like that song, she said, with just a tinge of reproach in her voice as she said it. I hate it, Maisie answered, trying hard to compose herself. Why so? The tall, dark girl asked in a tone of calm and singular sweetness. It is sad, perhaps, but it is lovely and natural. My own name is Maisie, her new friend replied with an ill-repressed shudder, and somehow that song pursues me through life. I seem always to hear the horrid ring of the words when 6 broad gentlemen Kirkward shall carry ye. I wish to heaven my people had never called me Maisie. And yet why? The tall dark girl asked again with a sad mysterious air. Why this clinging to life, this terror of death, this inexplicable attachment to a world of misery? And with such eyes as yours too. Your eyes are like mine. Which was a compliment, certainly, for the dark girl's own pair were strangely deep and lustrous. People with eyes such as those that can look into futurity ought not surely to shrink from a mere gate like death. For death is but a gate. The gate of life in its fullest beauty is written over the door. Lors Duana Vitae. What door? Maisie asked, for she remembered having read those self-same words and tried in vain to translate them that very day. Though the meaning was now clear to her, the answer electrified her. The gate of the vault in Wolverden churchyard. She said it very low, but with pregnant expression. Oh, how dreadful! Maisie exclaimed, drawn back. The tall girl half frightened her. Not at all, the girl answered. This life is so short, so vain, so transitory, and beyond it is peace, eternal peace, the calm of rest, the joy of the spirit. You come to anchor at last, her companion added. But if one had somebody one would not wish to leave behind, Maisie suggested timidly. He will follow before long, the dark girl replied with quiet decision, interpreting rightly the sex of the indefinite substantive. Time passes so quickly, and if time passes quickly in time, how much more, then, in eternity? Hush, Yolande, the other dark girl put it, with a warming glance. There's a new tableau coming. Let me see. Is this the death of Ophelia? No. That's number 4. This is number 3. The martyrdom of St. Agnes.
Merry Christmas to you, my boy.
Thank you, sir. Same to you, sir. Oh, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening. Give us a penny.
Get out of this.
Clean? You call this clean?
Yeah.
Well, it is. Right, right. Tell them to stop that noise.
My lord, will you make your speech now, or will you let the ladies and gentlemen continue to enjoy themselves? Call silence for the loyal toast. My lord, ladies and gentlemen, pray silence for the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor of London. My lord.
Me lords, ladies, and gentlemen, Her Most Gracious Majesty, the Queen.
Doing frightening people out of their wits. Ebenezer Scrooge, for only you can see me.
What you want with me?
Much.
Oh, yeah.
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
In life? Why do you trouble me?
It is required of everyone that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. My spirit never walked beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hall. So I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere.
You are fettered. Why?
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link. Would you know the weight and length of the coil you bear yourself?
Speak words of comfort to me, Jacob Marley. Speak words of comfort.
Comfort? I have none to give. I am here to warn you, to save you, if that be possible.
To warn? To save me? From what?
From such a fate as mine, to wander through the world and witness what I cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turn to happiness.
But you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business? Mankind should have been my business. Charity, forbearance, benevolence, all were my business, as they should be yours. Now heed me, for my time is short. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. You shall behold the visions of a Christmas past, a Christmas present, and a Christmas yet to come. Expect the first when the clock strikes midnight tonight.
Marley!
Look to see me no more.
Marley!
My dear, Mrs. West said, positively oozing apology when she met Maisie in the supper room. I'm afraid you've been left in a corner by yourself almost all the evening. Oh dear no, Maisie answered with a quiet smile. I had that Oxford undergraduate at my elbow at first, and afterwards those 2 nice girls with the flowing white dresses and the beautiful eyes came and sat beside me. What's their name, I wonder? Which girls? Mrs. West asked with a little surprise in her tone, for her impression was rather that Maisie had been sitting between 2 empty chairs for the greater part of the evening, muttering at times to herself in the most uncanny way, but not talking to anyone. Maisie glanced around the room in search of her new friends, and for some time could not see them. At last she observed them in a remote alcove, drinking red wine by themselves out of Venetian glass speakers. Well, those 2, she said, pointing towards them. They're such charming girls. Can you tell me who they are? I've taken quite a fancy to them. Mrs. West gazed at them for a second, or rather, at the recess towards which Maisie pointed, and then turned to Maisie with much the same oddly embarrassed look and manner as the undergraduates. Oh, those, she said slowly, peering through and through her. Maisie thought, those? Must be some of the professionals for London. At any rate, I'm not sure which you mean. Over there by the curtain in the Moorish nook, you say? Well, I can't tell you their names, so they must be professionals. She went off with a singularly frightened manner. Maisie noticed it and wondered at it, but it made no greater lasting impression. When the party broke up, about midnight or a little later, Maisie went along the corridor to her own bedroom. At the end by the door, the two other girls happened to be standing apparently gossiping. "Oh, you've not gone home yet?" Maisie asked, as she passed to Yolande. "No, we're stopping here," the dark girl with the speaking eyes answered. Maisie paused for a second, then an impulse burst over her. "Will you come and see my room?" she asked a little timidly. "Shall we go, Hida?" Yolande said with an inquiring glance at her companion. Her friend nodded assent. Maisie opened the door and ushered them into her bedroom. The ostentatiously opulent fire was still burning brightly. The electric light flooded the room with its brilliancy. The curtains were drawn and the shutters fastened. For a while the three girls sat together by the hearth and gossiped quietly. Maisie liked her new friends. Their voices were so gentle, soft, and sympathetic, while for face and figure they might have sat as models to Burne-Jones or Botticelli. Their dresses, too, took her delicate Welsh fancy. They were so dainty, yet so simple. The soft silk fell in natural folds and dimples. The only ornaments they wore were two curious brooches of very antique workmanship, as Maisie supposed, somewhat Celtic in design, and enameled in blood red on a gold background. Each carried a flower laid loosely in her bosom. Yolande's was an orchid, with long floating streamers in color and shape recalling some southern lizard. Dark purple spots dappled its lips and petals. Hida's was a flower of a sort Maisie had never seen, the stem spotted like a viper's skin, green flecked with russet brown and uncanny to look upon. On either side great twisted spirals of red and blue blossoms, each curled after the fashion of a scorpion's tail, very strange and lurid. Something weird and witch-like about flowers and dresses rather attracted Maisie. They affected her with the half-repellent fascination of a snake for a bird. She felt such blossoms were fit for incantations and sorceries. But a lily of the valley in Yolande's dark hair gave a sense of purity, which assorted better with the girl's exquisitely calm and nun-like beauty. After a while, Hida rose. "This air is close," she said. "It ought to be warm outside tonight, if one may judge by the sunset. May I open the window?" "Oh, certainly, if you like," Maisie answered, a vague foreboding now struggling within her against innate politeness. Hida drew back the curtains and unfastened the shutters. It was a moonlit evening. The breeze hardly stirred the bare boughs of the silver birches. A sprinkling of soft snow on the terrace and the hills just whitened the ground. The moon lighted it up. Falling full upon the hall, the church and tower below stood silhouetted and dark against the cloudless expanse of starry sky in the background. Hida opened the window. Cool, fresh air blew in, very soft and genial, in spite of the snow and the lateness of the season. "What a glorious night," she said, looking up at Orion overhead. "Shall we stroll out for a while in it?" If the suggestion had not been thrust upon her from outside, it would have never occurred to Maisie to walk abroad in a strange place in evening dress, on a winter's night, with snow whitening the ground. But Hida's voice sounded so sweetly persuasive, and the idea itself seemed so natural, now that she had once proposed it, that Maisie followed her two new friends onto the moonlit terrace without a moment's hesitation. They paced once or twice up and down the gravelled walks. Strange to say, through a sprinkling of dry snow powdered the ground underfoot. The air was soft and balmy. Stranger still, Maisie noticed, almost without noticing it, that though they walked three abreast, only one pair of footprints, her own, lay impressed on the snow in a long trail when they turned at either end and repaced the platform. Yolande and Hida must step lightly indeed, or perhaps her own feet might be warmer or thinner shod as to melt the light layer of snow more rapidly. The girl slipped their arms through hers, a little thrill coursed through her. Then, after 3 or 4 turns up and down the terrace, Yolande led the way quietly down the broad flight of steps into the direction of the church on the lower level. In that bright, broad moonlight, Maisie went with them undeterred. The hall was still alive with the glare of electric lights in bedroom windows, and the presence of the other girls, both wholly free from any signs of fear, took off all sense of terror or loneliness. They strolled on into the churchyard. Maisie's eyes were now fixed on the new white tower, which merged in the silhouette against the starry sky into much the same gray and indefinite hue as the older parts of the building. Before she quite knew where she was, she found herself at the head of the worn stone steps which led into the vault, by whose door she had seen old Bessie sitting. In the pallid moonlight, with the aid of the greenish reflection from the snow, she could just read the words inscribed over the portal, the words that Yolande had repeated in the drawing room. Yolande moved down 1 step. Maisie drew back for the first time with a faint access of alarm. You're not going down there, she exclaimed, catching her breath for a second. Yes, I am, her new friend answered in a calmly quiet voice. Why not? We live here. You live here? Maisie echoed, freeing her arms by a sudden movement and standing away from her mysterious friends with a timulous shudder. Yes, we live here, Hida broke in without the slightest emotion. She said it in a voice of perfect calm, as one might say it of any house in a street in London. Maisie was far less terrified than she might have imagined beforehand would be the case under such unexpected conditions. The 2 girls were so simple, so natural, so strangely like herself, that she could not say she was really afraid of them. She shrank, it is true, from the nature of the door at which they stood, but she received the unearthly announcement that they lived there with scarcely more than a slight tremor of surprise and astonishment. You will come in with us, Hida said in a gently enticing tone. We went into your bedroom. Maisie hardly liked to say no. They seemed so anxious to show her their home. With trembling feet she moved down the first step, and then the second. Yolande kept ever 1 pace in front of her. As Maisie reached the 3rd step, the 2 girls, as if moved by one design, took her wrists in their hands, not unkindly, but coaxingly. They reached the actual doors of the vault itself, 2 heavy bronze valves meeting in the center. Each bore a ring for a handle, pierced through a gorgon's head embossed upon the surface. Yolande pushed them with her hand. They yielded instantly to her light touch and opened inward. Yolande, still in front, passed from the glow of the moon to the gloom of the vault, which a ray of moonlight just descended obliquely. As she passed for a second, a weird sight met Maisie's eyes. Her hands and face and dress became momentarily self-luminous, but through them, as they glowed, she could descry within every bone and joint of her living skeleton, dimly shadowed and dark through the luminous haze that marked her body. Maisie drew back once more, terrified, yet her terror was not quite what one would describe as fear. It was rather a vague sense of the profoundly mystical. I can't, she cried with an appealing glance. Hida, Yolande, I cannot go with you. Hida held her hand tight and almost seemed to force her, but Yolande in front, like a mother with her child, turned around with a grave smile. No, no, she said reprovingly. Let her come if she will, Hida, of her own accord, not otherwise. The tower demands a willing victim. Her hand on Maisie's wrist was strong but persuasive. It drew her without exercising the faintest compulsion. Will you come with us, dear? She said in that winning, silvery tone which had captivated Maisie's fancy from the very moment they spoke together. Maisie gazed into her eyes. They were deep and tender. A strange resolution seemed to nerve her for the effort. Yes, I will come with you, she answered slowly. Hida on one side, Yolande on the other, now went before her, holding her wrists in their grasp, but rather enticing than drawing her. As each reached the gloom, the same luminous appearance which Maisie had noticed before spread over their bodies, and the same weird skeleton shape showed faintly through their limbs in darker shadow. Maisie crossed the threshold with a convulsive gasp. As she crossed it, she looked down at her own dress and body. They were semi-transparent, like the others, though not quite so self-luminous. The framework of her limbs appeared within less certain outline, yet quite dark and distinguishable.
And all's well, with clock, and all's well.
Spirit of Christmas past. I am here to show you the things that have been. Look back beyond the gulf of vanished years.
The money is due and must be paid. But, sir, that's impossible. Then I shall have no alternative but to take immediate steps to recover it. But, sir, you must see that if... That is the way I conduct my business. You don't mean sell us up? That is precisely what I do mean. But, sir, I couldn't work in the hospital.
Mr. Scrooge, I beg of you.
Good day.
You can't do this. You can't be so unjust.
Give us a little more time. A week.
Please.
I didn't hear you come in.
So it is true.
What do you mean?
What they say. That you're a man without pity, without remorse, who weighs everything in the scale of profit and loss.
Bill!
I heard. I couldn't help you.
But this is business. If I were to allow sentiment to enter this counting house, I should be in the bankruptcy court within a year. And as for that couple who've just gone out, well, set your mind at rest about them. Worthless, shiftless pair. You've had my good money. Now I want to avoid paying it back.
Your money. Your good money. They asked you for a little breathing space, a little time in which to pay. That was all.
Enough of this, Bill. I am ready to make allowances for your feelings as a woman. But I must ask you to leave my business affairs alone. When you marry me, I shall insist. Take leave of your senses.
I've tried hard not to believe what they've said about you. I'd give anything not to believe it now. But the evidence of my own eyes and ears, I must believe. You were not always so. But I can see now that one passion and one passion only engrosses you. Gain.
What then? Even if it were so, I'm not changed towards you.
You are changed. Changed in every way. You're not the man you were. Our contract's an old one, made when we were poor and content to be so. May you be happy, alone, in the life you've chosen.
Now look and see the happiness you have missed.
Here we go, Jack.
Oh, by the way, Belle, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Oh? Who was it?
You guess.
How can I? I don't know. It wasn't Mr. Scrooge.
Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up and there was a candle inside, I could scarcely help see him. His partner's on the point of death, I hear. And there he sat, alone. Quite alone in the world, I do believe.
Spirit, I cannot bear it. Haunt me no more.
I told you these were the shadows of the things that have been, that they are what they are. Do not blame me.
Take me back.
It's 1 o'clock, I know it is.
Come in and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You have never seen the like of me before.
Never.
I've never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning I am very young. My elder brothers, born in those later years.
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1,800.
A tremendous family to provide for. Spirit, conduct me where you will. Already I have been forth under compulsion and learned the lesson which is working now. If you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe, and you shall see how your poor clerk, with his paltry 15 shillings a week, which you so grudgingly dole out to him, keeps Christmas. Touch my robe.
You get Tiny Tim. That one.
Thank you, Father. Mother, we've been outside the baker's and we smell a lovely goose cooking. Yes, and we're sure it's ours. Yes, it's a lovely goose, the lovely goose, the lovely
Oh, what has ever got your precious father then? And your brother, Tiny Tim. And your sister Martha was as late last Christmas by half an hour.
Mother!
Oh, bless your heart, my dear.
Merry Christmas, Martha.
How late you are.
Merry Christmas,
There, there. No.
We had a deal of bonnets to finish up last night and had to clear away this morning.
Well, never mind, as long as you are. Come. Come and sit before the fire, my dear, and get it warm.
No. Here's Martha. Quick, Martha, hide. Quick, hide.
Here we are. And where's our Martha?
She's, not coming.
Not coming? Not coming upon Christmas Day?
Yes, Father dear, here I am. That'll be the goose. I'll fetch it in.
Oh, but you're cold. Come and sit down and warm a bit. And how did Tiny Tim behave?
As good as gold, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped that the people in the church saw him, because he was a cripple. And that it might be pleasant for them to remember, upon a Christmas day, who made lame beggars walk, and blind men see. But he's growing stronger. Yes, growing strong and hearty.
I wish I could believe you, Bob. But I'm afraid.
There never will be such a goose. For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful.
Amen.
In 10 minutes, I can already vouch for. And its flavor will, I know, surpass my utmost expectations. With the mashed potato and the apple sauce, it will, I am sure, present a delightful combination that we shall remember until our dying day. Delicious. Delicious. That's the best goose we ever had, Mother.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I've eaten too much.
And even now, we haven't eaten it all.
You laugh.
Laugh. I envy them. My dear, regarding the momentous question, pudding. You look pale, my love, and nervous.
I am nervous, my dear, and anxious about that pudding. Pray heaven all will be well. I'll go and fetch it.
Let me come and help too, Mother.
You shall, my darling.
I'm anxious about that pudding. You know, your mother's been gone a long time. Supposing the pudding has broken in turning it out.
What?
Or supposing that somebody has got over the back wall and stolen it.
What?
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dear.
God bless us, everyone.
Spirit, tell me that Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered in the future, the child will die.
Oh, tell me that he'll be spared.
If he is like to die, had he not better do it and decrease the surplus population?
Your words.
Man, if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, when men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven, you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child.
Toast. I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon. I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
But, my dear, the children, Christmas Day.
It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
Well, I'll drink his health for your sake and the day's, not his. He'll be very merry and very happy, I've no doubt. Here's Mr. Scrooge's health.
Now, children, all together, Mr. Scrooge's health. Mr. Scrooge's health.
Mr. Scrooge's health.
And now, Tiny Tim will sing to us.
Yes, I do sing. What shall I sing? Hark the heralding.
Yes, hark the heralding.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King, peace on earth and mercy nigh of God.
Come now and see how others keep Christmas.
To you. And a Merry Christmas to you.
And he said Christmas was a humbug. And he believed it, too.
Well, more shame on him, friend.
Oh, he's a comical old fellow, and that's the truth.
He isn't so pleasant as he might be.
Well, his offences carry their own punishments, and I've nothing to say against him.
But surely he's very rich. At least you've often told me so.
Well, what of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it.
He can't make himself comfortable with
He
it.
hasn't even the satisfaction of thinking that he's ever going to benefit us with it.
Well, I've no patience with your Uncle Scrooge.
Oh, I have. I'm sorry for him. And here, he's taken it into his head to dislike us, and he won't even come and dine with us. Well, what are you going to play at?
Riddles!
Good. I'll ask you one. What does the following represent? An animal. Rather a disagreeable animal. A savage animal. An animal that grunts and growls and talks and lives in London.
And walks the streets.
Yes.
And isn't even made of show?
No.
Doesn't have a embroidery?
No.
Isn't a horse?
No.
Nor a cow?
No. Not a dog. Who?
Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not been, but will be in the time to come. And as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company.
I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die.
Heaven knows.
What's he done with his money?
Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know.
How are you? Very well. How are you?
So old Nick has got his own at last.
Yes, so I'm told. Cold, isn't it?
Seasonable for Christmas time.
Oh, yes.
You're not a skater, I
Oh,
suppose.
no, I've got something else to think about.
I do not see myself in my accustomed place. Where am I? Why am I not there?
Let the charwoman alone to be the first. Let the laundress alone. alone to be the second.
And let the undertaker's man alone to be the third.
Look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we hadn't all three met here without meaning it.
You couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlor. Come on.
Don't stand there staring as if you were afraid, woman. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like this? Not a dead man, I hope.
Open this bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. I ain't afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it.
There's your lookout. I wouldn't give another sixpence.
Now mind, Joe.
Ah. 8 shillings. I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine.
And now unto my bundle, Joe.
Bed curtains.
Ah, bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him lying there?
Why not?
You was born to make your fortune, and you will certainly do it.
Here, don't drop the oil on the blankets.
His blankets?
Whose else's? He isn't likely to take cold without them, I dare say.
Hope he didn't die of anything catching.
Oh, don't you be afraid of that. Now, you can look through that shirt until your eyes ache and you won't find a hole in it. It's the best he had. It'd have been wasted if it hadn't been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. I took it off him. Calico's just as becoming to the body. He couldn't have looked uglier than he did in that one. This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heavens! What is that? Is this the man they spoke of? Neglected, robbed, hated. Can you not show me some tenderness connected with death?
Took a child and set him in the midst of them.
colour hurts my eyes. Makes me weep by candlelight. I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home from work. Must be near his time.
Past it, rather.
I think he walks a little slower than he used these last few evenings, Mother.
Yes. I've known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed.
So have I, often. And so have I.
But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so it was no trouble. No trouble. There's your father at the door.
Well, my dear.
Well, Father.
Well, ah, Egg. My dear, you have been quick. They'll be done long before Sunday.
Sunday? You went today then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I've seen where our Tiny Tim is to rest. It had done you good to see how green a place it is. Oh, you'll see it often. I promised him that we would walk there of a Sunday. My little child.
Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God.
I met Mr. Scrooge's nephew today, and he said to me, I'm heartily sorry for you, Mr. Cratchit, and heartily sorry for your good wife. Though how he knew that, I don't know.
Knew what, my dear?
Why, that you were a good wife.
Everybody knows that.
Well observed, my boy. And he said, if there's any service that I can do for you, pray come to me. It almost seemed as though he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. And I'm sure we shall none of us forget him, nor this first parting there has been among us.
Never, Father.
And I know that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was but a little child, We shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it.
No, Father.
I'm very happy. Very happy.
Now, Spirit, tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead. Nearer to the stone at which you point. Tell me, are these the shadows of the things that will be? Or are they the shadows of the things that may be only? Ebenezer Scrooge! That man who lay upon the bed. No, Spirit, no. I'll not be the man I was. I'll not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if it is all too late? Tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. No, no.
You know, having the same kind of moment reading this story that I have when I'm watching horror movies. And you know that one person is just making all the wrong decisions. I feel like that's Maisie. Poor, sweet, naive Maisie. But the doors swung two of themselves behind her. The three stood alone in the vault of Wolverden. Alone for a moment or two, and then, as her eyes grew accustomed to the gray dusk of the interior, Maisie began to perceive that the vault opened out into a large and beautiful hall, or crypt. Dimly lighted at first, but becoming each moment more vaguely clear and more dreamily definite. Gradually, she could make out great rock-hewn pillars, Romanesque in their outline, or dimly oriental, like the sculptured columns in the caves of Elora, supporting a roof of vague and uncertain dimensions, more or less strangely dome-shaped. The effect on the whole was like that of the second impression produced by some dim cathedral, such as Chartres or Milan, after the eyes have grown accustomed to the mellow light from the stained glass windows, and have recovered from the blinding glare of the outer sunlight. But the architecture, if one may call it so, was more mosque-like and magical. She turned toward her companions, Yolande and Hida, who stood still beside her. Their bodies were now self-luminous to a greater degree than even at the threshold, but they were terrible transparency. But the terrible transparency had disappeared altogether. They were once more beautiful, though strangely transfigured, and more than mortal women. Then Maisie understood in her own soul, dimly, the meaning of those mystic words written over the portal. Death is the gate of life, and also the interpretation of that awful vision of death dwelling within them as they crossed the threshold, for through the gate they had passed to this underground palace. Her two guides still held her hands, one on either side, but they seemed rather to lead her on now, seductively and resistlessly, than to draw or compel her. As she moved in through the hall with its endless vistas of shadowy pillars, seemed now behind, now in dim perspective, she was gradually aware that many other people crowded its aisles and corridors. Slowly, they took shape as forms more or less clad mysteriously, varied, and of many ages. Some of them wore flowing robes, half medieval in shape, like the two friends who had brought her here. They looked like the saints on a stained glass window. Others were girt merely with a light and floating cone sash, while some stood dimly nude in the darker recesses of the temple or palace. All leaned eagerly forward with one mind as she approached, and regarded her with deep and sympathetic interest. A few of them murmured words, mere Kabbalistic sounds which at first she could not understand, but she moved further into the hall and saw at each step more clearly into the gloom. They began to have meaning for her. Before long, she was aware that she understood the mute tumult of voices at once by some internal instinct. The shades addressed her. She answered them. She knew by intuition what tongue they spoke. It was the language of the dead. And by passing that portal with her two companions, she had herself became enabled both to speak and understand it. A soft and flowing tongue, this speech of the netherworld, all vowels it seemed, without distinguishable consonants, yet dimly recalling every other tongue, and compounded, as it were, of what was common to all of them. It flowed from those shadowy lips as clouds issue from a mountain valley. It was formless, uncertain, vague, but yet beautiful. She hardly knew indeed, as it fell upon her senses, if it were sound or perfume. Through this tenuous world of Maisie moved as in a dream, her two companions still cheering and gilding her, guiding her. When they reached an inner shrine or chantry of the temple, she was dimly conscious of more terrible forms pervading the background than any of those that had yet approached her. This was a more austere and antique apartment than the rest, a shadowy cloister, prehistoric in its severity. It recalled to her mind something indefinitely intermediate between the huge unwrought trilithons of Stonehenge and the massive granite pillars of Luxor. At the further end of the sanctuary, a sort of sphinx looked down on her, smiling mysteriously. At its base, on a rude megalithic throne in a solitary state, a high priest was seated. He bore in his hand a wand or scepter. All round, a strange court of half-unseen acolytes and shadowy hierophants stood attentive. They were girt, as she fancied, in what looked like leopard skins, or in the fells of some earlier prehistoric lion. They wore saber teeth, suspended by a string around their dusky necks. Others had ornaments of uncut amber, or hatchets of jade threaded as collars on a cord of sinew. A few, more barbaric than savage in type, flaunted torques of gold as armlets and necklaces. The high priest rose slowly and held out his two hands just level with his head, the palms turned outward. "You have brought a willing victim as guardian of the tower?" he asked in that mystic tongue of Yolande and Hida. "We have brought a willing victim," the two girls answered. The high priest gazed at her. His glance was piercing. Maisie trembled, less with fear than with a sense of strangeness, such as a neophyte might feel on being first presented at some courtly pageant. "You come of your own accord?" the priest inquired of her in solemn accents. "I come of my own accord," Maisie answered, with an inner consciousness that she was bearing her part in some immemorial ritual. Ancestral memories seemed to stir within her. "It is well," the priest murmured. Then he turned to her guides. Is she of royal lineage? He inquired, taking his wand in his hand again. She is a Llewellyn, Llewellyn answered, of royal lineage and of the race that, after your own, earliest bore sway in the land of Britain. She is in her veins the blood of Arthur, of Ambrosius, and of Vortigern. It is well, the priest said again. I know of these princes. Then he turned to Maisie. This is the ritual of those who build, he said in a very deep voice. It has been the ritual of those who build from the days of the builders of Mariaker and Avebury. Every building man makes shall have its human soul, the soul of a virgin, to guard and protect it. 3 souls it requires, as a living talisman against chance and change. 1 soul is the soul of the human victim slain beneath the foundation stone. She is the guardian spirit against earthquake and ruin. 1 soul is the soul of the human victim slain when the building is half built up. She is the guardian spirit against battle and tempest. 1 soul is the soul of the human victim who flings herself of her own free will off tower or gable when the building is complete. She is the guardian spirit against thunder and lightning. Unless the building be duly fastened with these 3, how can it hope to stand against the hostile powers of fire and flood and storm and earthquake? An assessor at his side, unnoticed till then, took up the parable. He had a stern Roman face and wore a shadowy suit of Roman armor. In times of old, he said with iron austerity, all men knew well these rules of building. They built in solid stone to endure forever. The works they erected have lasted to this day in this land and others. So built we the amphitheaters of Rome and Verona. So built we the walls of Lincoln, York, and London. In the blood of a king's son laid we the foundation stone. In the blood of a king's son laid we the coping stone. In the blood of a maiden of royal line fasted we the bastions against fire and lightning. But in these latter days, since faith grows dim, men built with burnt brick and rubble plaster. No foundation spirit or guardian soul do they give to their bridges, their walls, or their towers. So bridges break, and walls fall in, and towers crumble. And the art and mystery of building aright have perished from among you. He ceased. The high priest held out his wand and spoke again. We are the assembly of dead builders and dead victims, he said. For this mark of Wolverden, all of whom have built or have been built upon in this holy site of memorial sanctity, we are the stones of a living fabric. Before this place was a Christian church, it was a temple of Woden. And before it was a temple of Woden, it was a shrine of Hercules. And before it was a shrine of Hercules, it was a grove of Nodens. Before it was a grove of Nodens, it was a stone circle of the host of heaven. And before it was a stone circle of the host of heaven, it was the grave and tumulus and underground palace of me, who am the earliest builder of all in this place. For my name in my ancient tongue is Wolf, and I laid and hallowed it. And after me, Wolf, my namesake Wolfer, was this barrow called Ad Lupum in Wolverden. And all of these that are here with me have built and have been built upon in this holy site for all generations, and you are the last who come to join us. Maisie felt a cold thrill course down her spine as she spoke these words, but courage did not fail her. She was dimly aware that those who offer themselves as victims for service must offer themselves willingly. For the gods demand a voluntary victim. No beast can be slain unless it not assent, and none can be made a guardian spirit who takes not the post upon him of his own free will. She turned meekly to Heda. Who are you? She asked, trembling. I am Heda, the girl answered in the same soft, sweet voice and winning tone as before. Heda, the daughter of Gorm, the chief of the Northmen who settled in East Anglia. and I was a worshipper of Thor and Odin, and when my father Gorm fought against Alfred, King of Wessex, was I taken prisoner, and Wulfir, the Kenting, was then building the first church and tower of Wolverden, and they baptized me and shrived me, and I consented of my own free will to be built under the foundation stone, and there my body lies, built up to this day, and I am the guardian spirit against earthquake and ruin. And who are you? Maisie asked, turning again to Yolande. I am Yolande Fitz-Aylwin, the tall girl answered, a royal maiden too, sprung from the blood of Henry Plantagenet. When the Roland Fitzstephen was building anew the choir and chancel of Wulfir's minister, I chose to be immured in the fabric of the wall, for the love of the church and all holy saints, and there my body lies built up to this day, and I am the guardian against battle and tempest. Maisie held her friend's hand tight. Her voice hardly trembled. And I, she asked once more, what fate for me? Tell me. Your task is easier far, Yolande answered gently, for you shall be the guardian of the new tower against thunder and lightning. Now those who guard against earthquake and battle are buried live under the foundation stone or in the wall of the building. There they die a slow death of starvation and choking. But those who guard against thunder and lightning cast themselves alive of their own free will from the battlements of the tower and die in the air before they reach the ground. So their fate is the easiest and the lightest of all those who would serve mankind, and thenceforth they live with us here in our palace. Maisie clung to her hand still tighter. Must I do it? She asked, pleading. It is not a must, Yolande replied in the same caressing tone, yet with a calmness, as of one in whom earthly desires and earthly passions are quenched forever. It is as you choose yourself. None but a willing victim may be a guardian spirit. This glorious privilege comes but to the purest and best among us. Yet what better end can you ask for your soul than to dwell here in our midst as our comrade forever, where all is peace, and to preserve the tower whose guardian you are from evil assaults of lightning and thunderbolt? Maisie flung her arms around her friend's neck. But I am afraid, she murmured. Why she should even wish to consent, she knew not. Yet the strange, serene peace in these strange girls' eyes made her mysteriously in love with them, and with the fate they offered her. They seemed to move like the stars in their orbits. How shall I leap from the top? She cried. How shall I have courage to mount the stairs alone and fling myself off from the lonely battlement? Yolande unwound her arms with a gentle forbearance. She coaxed her as one coaxes an unwilling child. You will not be alone, she said with a tender pressure. We will all go with you. We will help you and encourage you. We will sing our sweet songs of life and death to you. Why should you draw back? All we have faced it in 10,000 ages, and we tell you with one voice, you need not fear it. 'Tis life you should fear, life with its dangers, its toils, its heartbreakings. Here we dwell forever in unbroken peace. Come join us. She held out her arms with an enticing gesture. Maisie sprang into them sobbing. Yes, I will come, she cried in an access of hysterical fervor. These are the arms of death. I embrace them. These are the lips of death. I kiss them. Yolande, I will do as you ask me. The tall girl in the luminous white robe stooped down and kissed her twice on the forehead in return. Then she looked at the high priest. We are ready, she murmured in a low, grave voice. The victim consents. The virgin will die. Lead on to the tower. We are ready. We are ready.
I will live. In the past, the present, and the future, oh, Jacob Marley. Heaven and Christmas time be praised for this. I thank you. On my knees, I thank you, Jacob. On my knees. Oh. No, they're not torn down. They're not torn down. Ah! The things that would have been may be dispelled. They will. They will. Yeah, they will. They will. A Merry Christmas. God bless you. Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm as happy as a sandboy. I'm as merry as an angel. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. Oh, Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year to all the world. Oh, wow, hey. Oh, yeah. Here's the saucepan that the girl was in. Yes, and there's the door that old Marley's ghost came through. Yes, it's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Oh, hooray, hooray. Glorious, glorious. Hey, boy. Hey, a Merry Christmas. It is Christmas Day, isn't it?
Why, of course.
I knew I hadn't missed it. Oh, the spirits have done it all in one night. Hey, do you know the poultry at the corner of the street next but one?
I don't know, I did.
An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know if they've sold the prize turkey that they had hanging there?
It'll be hanging there now.
Well, you go and buy it.
Walker.
No, I'm in earnest. You go and buy it and bring it back here, and I'll tell you where to take it. And you come back with a man, and I'll give you a shilling. You come back in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown.
Hooray!
Go on, hurry up. I'm going to send it to my clerk, Bob Cratchit. He won't know where it comes from. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. He's not dead, you know. He's not dead. What is it?
Shop shut. Can't make anyone hear.
Oh, that won't do. I've got to have that turkey. Oh, well, wait a minute. You go get me my overcoat and hat. I shan't be long. Then go to the box room and get me out my best clothes. Shop?
Yes, sir.
Christmas! Have you sold that prize turkey of yours yet? The big one, I mean. Now! What is it? What's to do? I want that big turkey of yours. Bring it round to my place at once. My friend will show you the way. Hello, Molly. And Merry Christmas. Ah, that's right. A Merry Christmas.
Oh. Oh.
Carry that to the Cratchits. You'll have to have a cab. There you are, my boy. There's the address. There's the money. Yes. And there's the money for you. Very kind of you to have brought it round. Ah, Merry Christmas, my dear.
Thank you, sir. The same to you.
Ah, good day, gentlemen. Merry Christmas to you. I hope you succeeded yesterday. Mr. Scrooge. Yes, that's my name. I'm afraid it's not a very pleasant one for you, but will you allow me to ask your pardon? And would you be good enough to put me down?
Lord bless my soul. My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious? A round 100?
Yes, not a farthing less. Not a farthing less. I'm afraid there are many back payments included in it.
My dear Mr. Scrooge.
Yes, you come round and see me. You will come round.
Oh, we will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you, gentlemen. Bless you.
Who's that won't come and dine with you? Uncle Scrooge. Oh. Still, what's the consequence? He won't lose much of a dinner.
Indeed. Well, I think he'll lose a very good dinner.
Is your master in, my dear?
Yes, sir.
Can I see him, my love?
He's in the dining room, sir. I'll show you in.
He knows me. He knows me.
You sit there. Thank you. Here, Flappy. Thank you so much.
Fred.
Bless my soul, who's this?
It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Why, it's Uncle Scrooge. It can't be. Will I? A Merry Christmas to you, Uncle. Come in. Come in and join us.
Welcome, Uncle. And a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, my dear. A Merry Christmas to you all.
A Merry Christmas.
Late for the office, Bob. It's nearly 9 o'clock. promised Mr. Scrooge you'll be earlier than usual this morning.
So I did, so I did. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye, my dear. Goodbye, my darling. Goodbye, my darling.
What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
I think you are, sir. I think you are.
It's only once a year, sir. It shan't be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
So I tell you what it is, my fine fellow. I'm not going to stand it any longer. And therefore, I'm going to raise your salary.
Sir, you must be joking.
Never more serious in all my life, Bob. I'm going to raise your salary, and as for tiny things, I'll be a second father to you. God bless you. No more work today, Bob. No work today. Make haste to your battery, Bob. They'll be wanting you today, Bob. They'll be wanting you today. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A Merry Christmas, my good fellow, that I've given you for many a year. Go on now. Go on. Merry Christmas to all the world. Happy New Year to everyone. God bless us all. God bless us everyone.
So concerned for Maisie. We all know Scrooge got his happy ending, but poor Maisie. The way that these spirits are saying it seems like the flinging and the jumping off the tower and the piece of death could possibly be a happy ending, but for someone so young, is that really? Well, I guess all we can do is continue to read and find out. Let's finish up and see what becomes of Maisie Llewellyn. From the recesses of the temple, if temple it were, from the inmost shrines of the shrouded cavern, unearthly music began to sound of itself, with wild modulation on strange reeds and tabors. It swept through the aisles like a rushing wind on a Eolian harp. At times it wailed with a voice like a woman's. At times it rose loud in an organ note of triumph. At times it sank low into a pensive and melancholy flute-like symphony. It waxed and waned, it swelled and died away again, but no man saw how or whence it proceeded. Wizard echoes issued from the crannies and vents in the invisible walls. They sighed from the ghostly interspaces of the pillars. They keened and moaned from the vast overhanging dome of the palace. Gradually, the song shaped itself by weird stages into a processional measure. At its sound, the high priest rose slowly from his immemorial seat on the mighty cromlech which formed his throne. The shades and leopard skins arranged themselves in bodiless rows on either hand, the ghostly wearers of the saber-toothed lion's fangs, followed by ministrants in the footsteps of their hierarch. Hida and Yolan took their places in the procession. Maisie stood between the two, with hair floating on the air. She looked like a novice who goes up to take the veil, accompanied and cheered by two elder sisters. The ghostly pageant began to move. Unseen music followed it with fitful gusts of melody. They passed down the main corridor between shadowy Doric or Ionic pillars, which grew dimmer and even dimmer again in the distance as they approached, with slow steps, the earthward portal. At the gate, the high priest pushed against the valves with his hands. They opened outward. He passed into the moonlight. The attendants thronged after him. As each wild figure crossed the threshold, the same strange sight as before met Maisie's eyes. For a second of time, each ghostly body became self-luminous, as with some curious phosphorescence, and through each at the moment of passing the portal, the dim outline of a skeleton loomed briefly visible. Next instant it had clothed itself as with earthly members. Maisie reached the outer air. As she did so, she gasped. For a second its chilliness and freshness almost choked her. She was conscious now that the atmosphere of the vault, though pleasant in its way and warm and dry, had been loaded with fumes as of burning incense and with somnolent vapors of poppy. Its drowsy ether had cast her into lethargy. But after the first minute in the outer world, the keen night air revived her. Snow lay still on the ground, a little deeper than when she first came out, and the moon rode lower otherwise. All was as before, save that only one or two lights still burned here and there in the great house on the terrace. Among them she could recognize her own room, on the ground floor in the new wing by its open window. The procession made its way across the churchyard toward the tower, as it was wound among the graves and owl-hooted. All at once Maisie remembered the lines that had so chilled her for a few short hours before in the drawing-room. The glowworm o'er graven stone shall light thee steady. The owl from the steeple sing, welcome, proud lady. But marvelous to relate, they were no longer alarmed her. She felt rather that a friend was welcoming her home. She clung to Yolan's hand with gentle pressure. As they passed in front of the porch with its ancient yew tree, a stealthy figure glided out like a ghost from the darkling shadow. It was a woman, bent and bowed, with the quivering limbs that shook half-praised. Maisie recognized old Bessie. I knew she would come, the old hag muttered between her toothless jaws. I knew Wolverden Tower would yet be duly fastened. She put herself, as of right, at the head of the procession. They moved on to the tower, gliding rather than walking. Old Bessie drew a rusty key from her pocket and fitted it with a twist into the brand-new lock. What turned the old mill will turn the new, she murmured, looking around and grinning. Maisie shrank from her as she shrank from not one of the dead, but she followed on still into the ringer's room at the base of the tower. Thence, a staircase in the corner led up to the summit. The high priest mounted the stair, chanting a mystic refrain whose runic sounds were no longer intelligible to Maisie. As she reached the outer air, the tongue of the dead seemed to have become a mere blank of mingled odors and murmurs to her. It was like a summer breeze sighing through a warm and resinous pine woods, but Yolanda and Hida spoke to her yet, to cheer her, in the language of the living. She recognized that as revenants they were still in touch with the upper air in the world of the embodied. They tempted her up the stair with encouraging fingers. Maisie followed them like a child, in implicit confidence. The steps wound round and round, spiraling, and the staircase was dim, but a supernatural light seemed to fill the tower, diffused from the bodies or souls of its occupants. At the head of all, the high priest was still chanted as he went his unearthly litany. Magic sounds of chimes seemed to swim in unison with his tune as they mounted. Were those floating notes material or spiritual? They passed the belfry. No tongue of metal wagged, but the rims of the great bells resounded and reverberated to the ghostly symphony with sympathetic music. Still they passed on and on, upward and upward. They reached the ladder that alone gave access to the final story. Dust and cobwebs already clung to it. Once Maisie drew back, it was dark overhead, and the luminous haze began to fail them. Her friends held her hands with the same kindly, persuasive touch as ever. "I cannot," she cried, shrinking away from the tall, steep ladder. "Oh, Yolande, I cannot." "Yes, dear," Yolande whispered in a soothing voice. "You can. It is but 10 steps, and I will hold your hand tight. Be brave and mount them." The sweet voice encouraged her. It was like heavenly music. She knew not why she should submit, or rather consent, but none of the less she consented. Some spell seemed cast over her. With tremulous feet, scarcely realizing what she did, she mounted the ladder and went up 4 steps of it. Then she turned and looked down again. Old Bessie's wrinkled face met her frightened eyes. It was smiling horribly. She shrank back once more, terrified. "I can't do it," she cried. "If that woman comes up, I'm not afraid of you, dear." She pressed Yolande's hand. "But she is too terrible." Hida looked back and raised a warning finger. "Let the woman stop below," she said. "She savors too much of the evil world. We must do nothing to frighten the willing victim." The high priest, by this time, with his ghostly fingers, had opened the trap door that gave the access to the summit. A ray of moonlight slanted through the aperture. The breeze blew down with it. Once more, Maisie felt the stimulating and reviving effect of the open air. Vivified by its freshness, she struggled up to the top, passed out through the trap, and found herself standing on the open platform at the summit of the tower. The moon had not yet quite set. The light on the snow shone pale green and mysterious. For miles and miles around she could just make out, by its aid, the dim contour of the downs, with the thin white mantle in the solemn silence. Range behind range rose faintly shimmering. The chant had now ceased. The high priest and his acolytes were mingling strange herbs in a mazar bowl or chalice. Strange perfumes of myrrh and of cardamoms were wafted towards her. The men in leopard skins burnt smoldering sticks of spikenard. Then Yolande led the postulant forward again and placed her close up to the new white parapet. Stone heads of virgins smiled on her from the angles. "She must front the east," Hida said in a tone of authority, and Yolande turned her face towards the rising sun accordingly. Then she opened her lips and spoke in a very solemn voice. "From this new-built tower you fling yourself," she said, or rather, intoned, "that you may serve mankind and all the powers that be as its guardian spirit against thunder and lightning. Judged a virgin, pure and unsullied in deed and word and thought, of royal race and ancient lineage, you are found worthy to be entrusted with this charge and this honor. Take care that it shall never dart or thunderbolt assault this tower, as she that is below you takes care to preserve it from earthquake and ruin, and she that is midway takes care to preserve it from battle and tempest. This is your charge. See well that you keep it." She took her by both hands. "Mary Llewellyn," she said, "you willing victim, step onto the battlement." Maisie knew not why, but with very little shrinking she stepped as she was told, by the aid of the wooden footstool, onto the eastward-looking parapet. There, in her loose white robe, with her arms spread abroad, and her hair flying free, she poised herself for a second, as about to shake out some unseen wings and throw herself on the air like a swift or a swallow. "Mary Llewellyn," Yolande said once more in a still deeper tone, with ineffable earnest. Cast yourself down, a willing sacrifice for the service of man and the security of this tower against thunderbolt and lightning. Maisie stretched her arms wider and leaned forward in act to leap from the edge of the parapet onto the snow-clad churchyard. 1 second more, and the sacrifice would have been complete. But before she could launch herself from the tower, she felt suddenly a hand laid upon her shoulder from behind to restrain her. Even in her existing state of nervous exaltation, she was aware at once that it was the hand of a living and solid mortal, not that of a soul or guardian spirit. It lay heavier upon her than heated or yawns. It seemed to clog and burden her. With a violent effort, she strove to shake herself free and carry out her now fixed intention of self-immolation for the safety of the tower. But the hand was too strong for her. She could not shake it off. It gripped and held her. She yielded, and reeling, fell back with a gasp onto the platform of the tower. At the selfsame moment, a strange terror and commotion seemed to seize all at once on the assembled spirits. A weird cry rang voiceless through the shadowy company. Maisie heard it as in a dream, very dim and distant. It was thin as a bat's note, almost inaudible to the ear, yet perceived by the brain, or at least by the spirit. It was a cry of alarm, of fright, of warning. With one accord, all the hosts of phantoms rushed hurriedly toward the battlements and pinnacles. The ghostly high priest first went with his wand held downward. The men in leopard skins and other assistants followed in confusion. Theirs was a reckless rout. They flung themselves from the top like fugitives from a cliff and floated fast through the air on invisible pinions. Peeta and Yolande, ambassadors and intermediaries with the upper air, were the last to fly from the living presence. They clasped her hand silently and looked deep into her eyes. There was something in that calm yet regretful look that seemed to say, "Farewell. We have tried in vain to save you, sister, from the terrors of the living." The horde of spirits floated away on the air as in a witch's sabbath to the vault whence it issued. The doors swung on their rusty hinges and closed behind them. Maisie stood alone with the hand that grasped her on the tower. The shock of the grasp and the sudden departure of the ghostly band in such wild dismay threw Maisie for a while into a state of semi-unconsciousness. Her head reeled around, her brain swam faintly. She clutched for support at the parapet of the tower, but the hand that held her sustained her still. She felt herself gently drawn down with quiet mastery and laid on the stone floor close by the trapdoor that led to the ladder. The next thing of which she could feel sure was the voice of the Oxford undergraduate. He was distinctly frightened and not a little tremulous. "I think," he said very softly, laying her head on his lap, "you had better rest a while, Miss Llewellyn, before you try to get down again. I hope I didn't catch you and disturb you too hastily, but one step more and you would have been over the edge. I really couldn't help it." "Let me go," Maisie moaned, trying to raise herself again, but feeling too faint and ill to make the necessary effort to recover the power of motion. "I want to go with him. I want to join them." "Some of the others will be up before long," the undergraduate said, supporting her head in his hands, "and they'll help me get you down again. Mr. Yates is in the belfry. Meanwhile, if I were you, I'd lie quite still and take a drop or two of this brandy." He held it to her lips. Maisie drank a mouthful, hardly knowing what she did. Then she lay quiet, where he placed her for some minutes. How they lifted her down and conveyed her to her bed she scarcely knew. She was dazed and terrified. She could only remember afterward that 3 or 4 gentlemen in roughly huddled clothes had carried or handled her down the ladder between them. The spiral stair and all the rest were a blank to her. When she awoke, she was lying in her bed in the same room at the hall, with Mrs. West by her side, leaning over her tenderly. Maisie looked up through her closed eyes and just saw the motherly face and gray hair bending above her. Then voices came to her from the mist vaguely. "Yesterday was so hot for the time of year, you see. Very unusual weather, of course, for Christmas. But a thunderstorm? So strange. I put it down to that. The electrical disturbance must have affected the poor child's head. Then it dawned upon her that the conversation she heard was passing between Mrs. West and a doctor. She raised herself suddenly and wildly on her arms. The bed faced the window. She looked out and beheld the tower of Wolverden Church split from top to bottom with a mighty rent, while half of it lay tossed in fragments on the ground in the churchyard. "What is it?" she cried wildly, with a blush as of shame. "Hush, hush," the doctor said. "Don't trouble, don't look at it." "Was it after I came down?" Maisie moaned in vague terror. The doctor nodded. "An hour after you were brought down," he said. "A thunderstorm broke over it. The lightning struck and shattered the tower. They had not yet put in the lightning conductor. It was to have been done on Boxing Day." A weird remorse possessed Maisie's soul. "My fault," she cried, starting up. "My fault, my fault. I neglected my duty." "Don't talk," the doctor answered, looking hard at her. "It is always dangerous to be too suddenly aroused from these curious, overwrought sleeps and trances." "And old Bessie?" Maisie exclaimed, trembling with an eerie presentiment. The doctor glanced at Mrs. West. "How did she know?" he whispered. Then he turned to Maisie. "You may as well be told the truth as suspect it," he said slowly. "Old Bessie must have been watching there. She was crushed and half buried beneath the falling tower." "One more question, Mrs. West," Maisie murmured, growing faint with an access of supernatural fear. "Those two nice girls who sat on the chairs at each side of me through the tableau, are they hurt? Were they in it?" Mrs. West soothed her hand. "My dear child," she said gravely with quiet emphasis, "there were no two girls. This is mere hallucination. You sat alone by yourself through the whole of the evening." Nothing like little death to bring in the Christmas spirit. Oh, thank you for joining me to help celebrate the holidays in my own special way. I hope that no matter what you celebrate, whether it is Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, that it is full